So I want to begin today, instead of with a proposition or some idea for you, I'd like to begin with a confession, if I could do that. And it hopefully will go along with your doctrine. It will agree with what I'm about to say and what I'm about to confess about myself. But I know it to be true, and it's simply this. I'm messed up. I'm, whatever word you want to use for it, fractured, broken, bent. But I am a person who is called to a divine task, who still struggles with weakness. I am so grateful for the regeneration power of God to build new life in us and to give us a new identity. But this struggle with still being wrapped in this flesh that I have and living in a system that really is not conducive towards following God or following Jesus, certainly I can say to you today that I thought that becoming a pastor would get me over all of that, but it hasn't yet. I bruise, I bleed, I gasp at times. I don't know about you. And I can prove to you that I'm messed up. I can give you an example of this. I think about 2 years ago, about 7-8 years ago when I first started texting. Does anybody here remember life before we texted anybody? You guys remember that? Yeah, before we had that. But life before texting, and for some reason, I don't know if I'm an old soul, whatever it is, it takes me a while to come around on things. And so I was resistant to text because I didn't want somebody to have actually, that much connection with me wherever I went and immediacy. I was just, it scared me a little bit. So I was hesitant to start texting it from the very beginning. But finally I gave in. And I started texting, and I remember I got a new phone, and they said, here's how you text, here's how it goes. And I still remember the very first text I ever got. It said this, it said, yo, we be clubbing tonight? That's what my first text I ever had. I was like, Grandma? Is that you? And actually, the first text I ever got was from a wrong number. That's the honest truth. I got a new number, and it was from the last person. Even worse than that, when I first started texting, I didn't really know what all the acronyms meant. All the little letters, you know what I'm talking about, that you do? Like LOL. What does LOL mean? You know what it means. Laugh out loud, right? I thought it meant lots of love, okay? So imagine when I get a text from somebody, Pastor Nathan, I'm deathly sick, headed to the hospital, very concerned. I respond, LOL, send. Nothing like making fun of sick people, right? For a little pastoral ministry with it, right? So I'm messed up. And here's the reality. I married a gorgeous, loving, steadfast woman who can kind of be messed up too. And we were able to produce children who also are messed up as well with us. Now, the truth of the matter is that when I first got invited to preach here, and I'm so grateful for the honor, Wesley, and thank you for inviting me to be here. But when I first thought of it, this is not really what I wanted to bring to you. This is not really when I preach. I mean, you can imagine, you get the chance and the opportunity to preach to your peers, the flesh kind of takes over, and you think to yourself, man, how could I really impress them with my strengths? What could I really do that could be really impressive to my peers and to invest them in that way? And I wanted a sermon, something like, 7 sizzling secrets to making your church awesome, and something of that sort. And I was even going to bring it down to 5 for the Calvinists in the room, and just to make sure that we were all in one accord with that. And I wanted just to make, to just inspire you, and with my strength, bring out some word that I cross-referenced with the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and was able to bring a new nuance, and you just open up the scripture in a brand new way to you in that. But the truth of the matter is, almost immediately after I was asked to come and speak here, and I found out what the theme was, I knew that God was calling me to speak not out of my strength, but out of my weakness. Now, I'll just be honest with you, that's a hard thing to do. And the reason I knew it, is because when I was asked, I was coming and am coming out of one of the heavier, darker times in 20 years of ministry that I've ever experienced. I'm just being honest. I mean, I went through a spell that was difficult. This year has been a hard year on my family and hard on me personally in many ways. I went through a time where my energy was lacking and my motivation was not strong. I didn't feel creative. I mean, I would get up to preach and God would give me a dose of adrenaline and I would be able to, and inspire me, and I would be able to offer his word in ways that I think were honoring to him in the midst of that. But then I would go home and I would crash, and there was this emptiness and this deadness to the point, and very few people even know this, to the point where I began to ask the question, God, am I even supposed to be doing this? If you'd asked me a year ago, 2 years ago, if I would have ever said that to myself, I would have told you no way. That there's no way that I ever would have. You want to hear something more ironic? My church was going great. It was very successful. We were growing and our attendance was up and our tithe was up. I worked with some of my very best friends in the world. I have a great camaraderie and brotherhood and have a congregation, honestly, and I don't mean this to gloat because I think it's one of the awesome things that God has blessed us with, a congregation who loves division and loves to follow a vision. I mean, those are incredible blessings to have in my life. And I looked around and I said, God, if this is all going so well, how come I'm struggling like I am today? And what a lot of people may not have known was that in that time, it really wasn't church that had discouraged me, but my family, and people closest to me know this, my family, man, we just were like a punching bag for a while. As mentioned, I have 4 kids, and so there's 6 of us in our family. And I'm not kidding you this, at one time, we were dealing with 8 chronic illnesses in our family. And it seemed like every day there was another person sick in our family. On top of that, I watched my wife get severely wounded in a very difficult relational situation. And I won't go into the detail, of course, but we had a large financial loss, and it just felt like one thing after another. And so here's what I figured out finally, or God revealed to me in this. I figured out that I was cruising along pretty well as long as I was the person who was meeting the needs at church. But then when the needs at home became overwhelming, it was more than I could bear, and something in my heart and something in my soul began to shut down. And I'm telling you the honest truth when I tell you this. Over the last 2 months, the light has begun to shine and the heaviness has begun to be removed, and the motivation and the creativity and the desire, all of that, I feel swelling back inside of me. But can I just tell you, that season stunk. Can I just tell you that? I don't like it at all. And yet it's a reality for us that we all can face. And this theme today is revival. I think Wesley said it best. If revival is going to happen, it's going to happen because it starts in the lives of pastors. And that's going to happen because we're going to get honest about our need and honest about our heart and allow God to do surgery and to do work inside of us. I want you to turn, if you will, with me to John chapter 13. John 13. And this is a familiar story to you, I know, when Jesus washes his disciples' feet and teaches them from that. And it's a familiar story for me, but I want to read the 17 verses here, and I want you to hear the whole part of it. In chapter 13, verse 1 of John, it says, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And supper being ended, the devil having already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper and laid aside the garments, took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them in the towel with which he was girded. And then he came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, "Lord, are you washing my feet?" And this is the conversation I want us to focus on. And Jesus answered and said to him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but you will know after this." And Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." And Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "He who is bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not all of you." For he knew who would betray him. Therefore he said, "You are not all clean." So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments and sat down again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, 'Well, for so I am.' If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." I can guess that I have preached this passage as much as any passage in the New Testament. But just about every time that I preach it, I focus on the second half of it, of Jesus' teachings about why he washes the feet and about his challenge to his disciples to be the kind of servants who serve others, who take the humble place, who take the lowly place, and are willing to do the dirty thing, the hard thing here, and to wash the feet of people. And that's become an important theme for us. I don't know about you, but I am tired of the consumerism in American church. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of seeing pastors as customer service agents who are simply here to be able to keep people happy so that they'll come to our religious place of service rather than the one down the road. I'm tired of that game. I'm tired of the self-centeredness of that. I'm tired of the idea that we come to church for the perks and the benefits of membership, and when we don't get those perks, we're going to whine and we're going to gripe and we're going to complain about that. And in the meantime, we're spending so much of our energy and resources on trying to keep all of that consumerism happy that very little gets done for the kingdom of God and his mission. I'm tired of that. How about you? And you can see how the second part of this passage speaks to that, right? And we have preached this at our church because we've desired to have a church to make the mission come first, where we see the church not here for us, for our benefit, but the church is something that happens through us as we work as a part of the mission. We've seen our church ignite. Man, I can't even tell you. If I sound proud of my church, I just that I love the people in my church and the church that I'm at. I mean, the amazing missional spirit of the people at Heartland, it just blows me away. The things that are happening, the places we're partnering with, what's going on. And so this kind of passage has been one of those words from God, has been one of those examples that has been one of our dominant metaphors about what we're supposed to be and do as disciples of Jesus Christ. And so I preached it and I preached it and I preached it. But there is one important thing in this passage that for a long time I knew it was there, but it didn't really speak to my heart all that much. And that is the sequence that takes place. I want you to notice, and you already have, that before Jesus calls them to wash someone else's feet, he first serves them and washes their feet. There is a sequence to this. Friends, we are not simply servants of the Lord. We are served servants of the Lord. We are a group of people with whom Jesus has and does serve us. Man, I want you to get that message today. Wherever your heart is, wherever your state of mind is, whatever's going on in your life right now, did you know that Jesus attends to you? Did you know that Jesus serves you? Did you know that right now in this message, through his word, through worship, through the fellowship of brotherhood that we have here today, God desires through his Son to serve you? But what happens to us when we think we can be servants who do not need to be served by Jesus? And there is a danger for each of us in leadership to buy into our own press, to buy into the myth about us and the myths that are built about us, to think that we can serve and change the world without blatant authenticity and honesty before Jesus himself, to allow him to wash our dirty feet. There is a sequence here. Where do we learn the joy of serving? We learn it because we have been served. Where do we learn the glory of grace and love to give away to others? We learn it because we have been bestowed with grace and love through Jesus. These are not my words, they are his words, because what does he say? I did not come to be served, I came to serve and to give my life a ransom for many. Jesus intentionally, and part of the sovereign will of God, came as a servant to serve us. And when we mix up this sequence, when we think that we can ignore our frailty and our needs and our wounds and our difficult relationships and our sin and our temptation and our propensity for moral failure, when we think we can ignore them and simply serve him and not humble ourselves to be served by Jesus, I'm afraid we end up empty. Empty. The statistic was given about how many pastors were dismissed. Here's a few others, and I'm not huge on giving you a lot of statistics because they can be worked in a lot of different ways. But I think these anecdotally feel correct to you as well. The Gospel Coalition reports that 35 to 40% of pastors who go into ministry will not still be in ministry 5 years later. 60-80% will not be there 10 years later. 80% of pastors report that being in the ministry is adverse to their family health and well-being. 70% say they have no close friends. 70% also say that their self-esteem, the way they think of themselves now, is lower than when they started ministry. And 50% say that within the last month they have thought of leaving ministry. I want you to know today, tell me if this is true, I want you to know today that in my understanding, that every need, every wound, every moment of weariness, every broken relationship, every moment of fear and loneliness, every bit of pain from rejection that we experience, I want you to know that Jesus attends to them all. He attends to them all. And if we're resistant, and you notice in the passage here, Peter obviously is very resistant to this. When we're resistant to that, and there's many reasons for that, but when we're resistant to it, the result is we end up empty. You want to hear the myth that God revealed to me? I praise God for the last 6 months, even though they've been very difficult. I've had very close friends who have walked with it through me. I've had mentors who have counseled me through it, a supportive family to get through it. And one of the things I'm most thankful for is that I didn't simply ignore the warning signs going on in my life. I didn't. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that happened, and I see the role that it played in my life. Several years ago, I bought my first new car. I've only had one new car. Most of my cars have been used, but I bought my first new car, and I was driving it across our church parking lot, and I had it for 3 or 4 days, and that car died on me. Can you imagine taking it off the lot 3 or 4 days, it dies on you? I'm not going to lie to you. I was angry. I mean, I didn't use like real cuss words. I used like Baptist cuss words, and so just want to make sure that's clear. I was hitting the steering wheel. I was angry. I could not believe it. I was calling the people that sold me the car, some swindlers, and how they had taken me and all that sort of thing. I was very upset. I called somebody to come tow the car and to take it in. Couldn't believe that I bought this car in this way. And I called my wife, and I said to her, you'll never believe this. The brand new car I just bought is dead. It died on me. She asked me a very important question. She said, is there any gas in it? My friends, I ran out of gas in the car. Tow truck on the way. I'm gifted in some things. I'm not mechanically inclined. Can you tell that? You want to hear the worst thing about it? Like I'd like to blame the car, but the car did everything it could to warn me. Everything it could. I got this little thing on my car, on my dash. It's called a fuel gauge. I don't know if yours has that or not, but it's got an E on one side and an F on the other side. The fuel gauge was all the way on E, and it didn't stop there. It made a little light show up just to let me know that it was getting low. Every few minutes, it would start to beep just to tell me all of this was going on. And what happened to me is I would know I had a little bit of gas, but I think, I'll get a little bit later, and I'll get a little bit later, and I'll take care of it a little bit later. And then pretty soon I ran out of gas. Now, you got to know this, right? What is it that happens to us? What is it that happens to us when we serve without being served by Jesus? My friends, we have no love to give. We have no joy to give. We have no service to give. Listen, is this act of him washing the feet, is it not consistent with the gospel? Do you see this with me? I mean, right, Jesus is the Word become flesh. He's the image of the invisible God. Everything he said, everything he did was a revelation of God from his heart, from his mind, spoken to you and me. Every bit of it. This was not something that was accidental. On top of that, Jesus is teaching his disciples, the future leaders of his first church that he would create, and he is teaching them in the section of Scripture called the Farewell Discourse. He's giving them the final instructions before the cross and helping prepare them for after his ascension. And as he washes their feet, we see the congruence of what is happening there with the gospel. My friends, do you realize this? The gospel of Jesus Christ isn't that you had anything to bring to God, but that God brought everything to you and me through Jesus Christ. The gospel is not an I will gospel, it's an I need gospel. It's not a I can gospel, it's an I can't gospel. It's not an I give gospel, because what in the world do we have to give him? It is an I receive gospel. The posture of a heart that is being changed by the gospel is one that recognizes that in what God has done through Jesus, everything was accomplished. Everything was accomplished that was necessary for our peace with God, for our adoption into his family, for our being made new. Everything was accomplished at Jesus. On the cross, Jesus serves us, and he does for us what we could never do for ourselves. We are in the place of helplessness. We are in the place of charity. We are in the place of neediness when it comes to the gospel, right? And you think about this, when you're having your feet washed, are you not in that same posture, that gospel posture? Right? I mean, how many of you wash your own feet? 3 of you wash your feet. That is really just kind of creepy, to be honest with you. You wash your own feet. I mean, think about this. Who in the world doesn't wash their own feet? I mean, only people who don't have the capability. I mean, a little child does not wash their own feet, right? A baby. Somebody has to do it for them. Somebody who's physically deteriorated and not able to do that themselves, it has to be done for them, which means what? Having your feet washed is a helpless state in which your neediness is bare and transparent. Why do I tell you that? I tell you that because this, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but in my understanding is the gospel is not just that that initiates us into relationship with God and salvation, but the gospel is what we live in, right? And we need a gospel spirituality, not just a gospel evangelism. We need a spiritual walk that is gospel-centered. And I want to suggest to you that the same neediness and the same helplessness that we have in the moment of justification is the same character that must be a part of us in our sanctification. I believe it was Tim Keller who I first heard it said from, that the gospel is not the ABCs of Christianity, it is the A through Z. I mean, think about this. What does the gospel mean? It means what? Good news. Right? Think about it. You don't hear the gospel and then walk away unchanged by it. You can't unhear good news. Once you hear it, you've heard it. It's a part of you. It's a part of your life. And when Jesus has them in this helpless state and he washes them, they are in a place of neediness. They are in a place where Jesus is doing for them what they think they should be able to do for themselves. What humility that must bring. See, Peter is resistant, right? What exactly does Peter say? He says, you shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered him, if I do not wash you, you have no part with me. You understand this, right? We know this to be true. We don't come to Jesus on our terms. We come to him on his terms. We come to him as a child, helpless and needy. And I'm saying to us today, being a pastor does not remove us from that gospel spirituality, from that sense of being needy. It doesn't take every bit of that away. And my fear, honestly, is without gospel spirituality, without seeing that Jesus washes our feet, and then he meets us in that place of need. Man, we're going to be empty, and when we are empty, on top of that, we're going to be so prone to moral failure that it's not even funny. You show me a pastor who's empty, and I'll show you one who's about to be sifted. You know what happens to any of our hearts when we're empty and we're dead and it's heavy and everything? We look for anything that we possibly can find to give a little spark and a little bit of excitement into our lives. Man, do you think our brothers who have had moral failure, do you think they started out seeking that? You think that's the direction that they wanted? But there was an emptiness that is there. So honestly, if you'll be honest right now before God, and you would say, God, this is what's dirty about my feet. I'm lonely. I'm hurt. I'm struggling. I just want to feel like I'm doing some good in the world. I'm tired of being resisted by the very people you've called me to shepherd. I'm not perfect as a spouse. This is the thing. We see Peter's resistance, and I get it. Why does he resist? Here's what I'd like to suggest to you. There's two reasons I think he could resist. It doesn't spell it out here for us, and so I'm using some conjecture, I guess you could say. I think it could be one of two reasons. It is that he can't stand Jesus being so lowly. But the other part is, I think that it is humiliating for him to have the King of Glory wash his feet. Man, and his resistance then, if that's true, is all about pride. Isn't it? It's about pride. There is no group of people, I'm sorry to say this to you guys, but I see it in my life and I see it in us. There is no group of people more resistant than being honest about our own neediness and our own weakness and our own woundedness than pastors. We are too busy sizing ourselves up to the person in the church down the road. We'd never want them to see our weakness, right? On top of that, this is honest truth. If you're a pastor, you're a leader, your congregation has built a myth about you that you could never live up to. They have. You have the introversion and concentration of a scholar, and you are extroverted and a party animal like a cruise director. Right? And you better be both. You are a dashing husband. You are a gracious and yet stern father. Always. You never get lonely. You never feel rejected. You pray 17 hours a day. You've memorized the New Testament in Greek. There is a myth about, and this image that is placed on you. Listen, the thing that I have found in my own journey is simply this. Is if I try to buy into the myth that has been put on me, rather than living in authentic gospel spirituality in a place of weakness and humility before God, honest with my own struggles and needs, that if I try to buy into that, it's going to exhaust me faster than anything else. And I'll be honest, God has blessed me with a place to do that. I have a group of pastors who are around that I'm around all the time who I love and they love me. I have a group of elders in our church, and I can pour my heart out and be prayed over. Most pastors don't have that. Most pastors don't have it. Man, get this. There's got to be a culture change in our churches. And the culture change that I'm speaking about is this: that we've got to find it a worthy investment to invest into the emotional and spiritual health of our leaders. We spend more resources on keeping our landscaping looking good than we do in the hearts of our pastors. And we expect them to endure. And all the while, Jesus is saying, I don't care if you become a pastor. I don't care if you've been educated. I don't care how long you preach. You are still needy, and I am still your servant. He served us on the cross. He intercedes for us now. You are still needy, and I am still your servant. Brothers, sisters, my goal, my heart today is that we would understand that the greatest battleground that may be occurring for our churches might not be a culture war. It might be the war amongst the hearts and minds of our leadership. And if we're going to talk about widespread revival, renewal, refreshing, then it better be something that we say, I need that. I'm convinced that if you are refreshed and renewed, I'm convinced that that God has equipped us in such a way that if you are refreshed and renewed, that if you are allowing your feet to be washed, if you're honest about your neediness and your weakness, that if that is the case, I am convinced that there's nothing better for our churches than pastors who are in that state. Convinced of it. I don't want a straw man today, do you? I don't want to look out and say, this is for somebody else, do you? I don't want to go that direction. This is the battleground. And it is a battle. It's not for, was it wimps you said? Not for wimps? Man, you preach a great sermon one Sunday, you got another one to preach in 6 days. Right? And it better be just as good. I like what Wayne Cordero said in his book, Leading on Empty. He said, preaching every week is like giving birth and then finding out you're pregnant the next day. Right? So let me end with this. I've challenged you in your hearts. If you're a lay leader in your church, I just want to speak directly to you, right between your eyes. I want you to do something about it. Honestly. I want you to do everything you can do to make it a priority, to say, how do we edify our leaders? How do we invest in them? How do we make sure that they guard their families? How do we make sure that their hearts are fertile for spiritual growth? How do we nurture their relationship with Jesus? How do we protect that? Because you and I both know that as soon as that gospel spirituality is lost, our churches are sunk. If it's lost in the pastors, if it's lost in the leaders, then we don't have a chance. And you can talk about all the factors in church that you want to, but I would suggest to you that if we don't prioritize as churches how to make our leaders the best leaders that they can be, investing in them to let Jesus wash their feet and to nurture their spiritual lives, to help them have sizzling marriages, Song of Solomon marriages, you know, to encourage them to be fathers, whose parents or whose kids don't resent the fact that their parent is in ministry. I'm encouraging you, if you're a lay leader, that you would say today, man, I see this in the Word, and I'm taking it back to our church. I said to you once already, and I say to you again, we spend more on the flowers in our flower bed, on our landscaping at churches, more time and more money than we do for the health and refreshing and heart and minds of our leaders. Brothers and sisters, it ought not be so. Let me pray for you, please. Gracious God, we thank you for Jesus and for the grace you have shown through him. And Lord, we pray today that we could be served servants. God, we love to serve. There's joy in it for us. That's why we do what we do. But God, we recognize that anything we have to give has been given to us from you. Lord, I pray today, because there no doubt are folks in this room whose marriages are hanging by a thread. And God, I pray that as the dashboard goes off and says that they're about to be empty, Lord, that you would encourage them this week, this day, to get over their pride and to recognize their neediness for you. God, there are those in this room who are discouraged and those who are weary. God, there are those who have fallen into moral failure. And of course, we all fail, Lord, but some who are in adulterous relationships and some addicted to pornography. God, I pray that they wouldn't ignore what's happening in their lives any longer. And there's some, God, just tired. And then, Lord, there are some who are in a place of great joy and celebration. May they soak all of the goodness out of that, but may they also be humble enough to recognize their need to walk with you. We love you. We thank you for grace that is so powerful that it allows us to finally be honest and quit deceiving ourselves. May we confess even right now our neediness before you. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.